Last stretch, we saved the best for last. Open house. There's three presenters in this part. First up, Dassault Systems. Pedro, you will introduce yourself, I guess. After this, we have an online presentation from Bernhard Bock, and then ODA also wants to demonstrate validation. A little bit unclear how much time this block is going to take. We guess around until 3, and then we still have the tour of the facilities on the agenda. I heard that there will be a light tour with with Angela as our guide. So I know that people will be walking out maybe as well during this session, but just want to say thank you that you were here. It's really, really wonderful to be in person again. I hope this was a successful meeting. If you have any kind of feedback, just send it to me or Dan. And again, I would like to invite everyone to try to beat this wonderful hosting by Autodesk in the next sessions in February or October. Thank you again, Autodesk, also for this. All right, Pedro?
All right, thanks. So, yeah, for the people that are staying, I have prepared a list of topics that I'd like to bring up for everyone. I was offered very kindly 30 minutes, probably will take less time, but it depends on how much feedback you guys can give me. But to introduce myself briefly, for those of you that I haven't had a chance to talk to yet, my name is Pedro, and I work with Dassault Systems. My role within the company is portfolio manager, so I'm responsible for a part of our solutions that covers mostly common-made environments, such as another couple of things, but mostly common-made environments. And my part of the portfolio is the one that implements IFC, that, well, IFC among other open standards and the interoperability in general. It's a solution. And yeah, the topics that I'm bringing for you today, topics that I've gathered working with the R&D organization that is responsible for implementing the IFC standard from a system standpoint. There's 3 main topics that I'll be happy to share your thoughts on. First one is on, well, it has different names. It's actually incremental update, lifecycle management, depending on how you name it. It's basically the ability to compare what has changed between 2 IFC files. Actually, that is a pretty big deal for us, for many of our customers, for many different reasons. Actually, I would say the main one is we are working with some customers that need to exchange up to 100 to 200 IFC files per week. It's a huge volume, and for that, being able to do this incremental update significantly reduces the volume of data that you need to store and the volume of data you need to exchange. So I guess I don't need to show the benefits of other aspects like having the history of changes, if you have a loop between a contractor and contractor, being able to see what has changed between the previous version. So well, obviously really useful. And it's something that we are struggling to implement today, more or less. So we have some ideas on how to tackle that. There's technology already being developed and implemented, but from the IFC standard itself, there is a framework, but at least that I can given is that it's not actively used in the way it's meant to be. Happy to share feedback again on this from everyone. But basically, the way it's proposed to work on the IFC standard is to be IFC owner history. And well, we can read from the slide. Basically, the definition says that it's defines all the history and investigation-related information in order to provide fast access, blah, 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 blah. So basically, by definition, it should be referring to each independent object. But as of today, it's only referring to one per file to detect the history at the file level. So basically, what we are proposing is to leverage this entity to capture the modification history as it is intended to be, so that in essence it can be used to track the changes between 2 files. That involving, of course, the geometry, the attributes, and the relationships of the entity. So that being said, is that something that has been considered, or?
I've done a bit of work on it. Like I've produced recently an incremental exporter for Revit, so you can basically pick a previous baseline of the file and then merge, but only export revised elements using the Revit version GUID and then produce a merged IFC file. But the owner history then is like, if the type changes, do you change the owner history status of all the instances? Like, what constitutes a change is up for discussion and not standardized in itself. If a property changes in the property set, you can update the owner history on the property set, but should you also update the owner history on the element that hosts it or relates to it? So
that's actually a good point, like what constitutes a change and on which level you capture the change that happens. Yeah, that's, I guess, something that has to be everyone to discuss. Maybe it's like, today is a good start. Maybe we can do a follow-up with the vendors that are interested to have that discussion. But I think that overall would be interesting to, and that's also interesting to hear that you're capturing the change at the export time. Because I guess what we're looking at is doing the delta import. So in the, when you are importing a file, being able to take those changes at import time, but obviously if it's coming at the export time, it's already like,
and owner history in itself probably needs some improvements to better track changes through time as well. So what I've been doing is making groups and nested groups. So you can actually have a group for created objects, which then has a bunch of timestamps about which objects were created when, and modified objects with what was modified whenever. And then, of course, you've got the extra case of what objects were deleted, and are they still referenced in that data model? Or have they just disappeared and you have no history about what was deleted and when? So do you need your master model, which is live status, and then you have a second repository, which is any historic elements or obsolete objects that got deleted?
And John and I are using the same thing, but I'm working with Monic. We did a little proof of concept that's a merger, because I solved this problem by export individual files when they change, using the same logic of how to calculate this change. Then they're writing this on merge. Same approach, same problems you'd run into. I was actually going to start to coordinate between him and this work because they're only using owner history. I like the groups approach because it's still robust history. I mean, there's probably other ways to think about doing this with the time data in IFC, but we don't have to. And the other thing is, it allows us to bring up the discussion with Posse from. How long ago was this discussion we had with partial update?
Oh, some years.
Yeah, so there's finally a way to prove how to do it. So I think this is not the same thing, but like the same approach gives you partial update capability. So
On the infrastructure side, I would point out possibly the products I know, including other vendors other than Autodesk, this information is not available in file formats. You would have to put the attributes somehow and modify the software. And if you look at a road corridor, so calculated solid geometry of a road alignment could be 50 kilometers long. If I change that alignment in the slightest, I might have 90% of the file change. I do know that TUM, at the University in Munich, have a very good internal, I don't know if it's been made public yet, or will be made public, IFC diff tool that will take two IFCs and give you a third IFC with every single change, highlighting whether it was a removal, an addition, or a change. And that's down to parameter level. That seems to solve a lot of the problems when we haven't got the owner history.
so I guess that there are definitely ways you can work around that. And for what I've been told from market or R&D, we'll have ideas on how to implement that. But I guess that the question is more of how you standardize that, or if there's anything that needs to be part of the this IFC owner history that captures that to simplify that process, or it's managed at vendor level and then each of us come up with our own way of comparing the
And it's just timestamp, or is it a do it because I'm from Europe and therefore private information is tricky, but is it some user information to say who did the change? Again, that could make the problem even harder.
and everybody that you'll ask, the IFC5 discussion went every component version is
Yeah.
change detected, so we're gonna have to address it sooner or later. And change detection is one thing, but having to do it by brute force at the end versus doing it not ideal.
And the next question is really the identifier?
Yeah.
Every object have a GUID associated with this particular incarnation of it. Here's the GUID of the object as a concept, but here's this GUID of the object right now. And that would be, and if you're trying to capture difference, problem with that, of course, that doesn't tell you if that's a previous version or a future version.
Also with the GUID, there you have like one parameter, but it will not help you,
Not necessarily. Right. Even with the date, that's tricky, right? So, that assumes that there's only one person working on that model, right? You could get weird situations where something from the future date is somehow a previous version based on user A and user B.
I would, longer term, this is probably an IFC 5 discussion, but each object, even down to each parameter, should have a GUID. And each object and its value, geometric, the solve, geometry, or the parameter value, whatever, should have a commit GUID. And the date is stored on commit GUID. So the commit GUID says this user changes 50 things in their hour in the CAD package or open tool, and they committed it.
So would that become a database?
Yeah.
And is it better to maybe look at some database integrities to taking care of this kind of auditing history instead of like building the spec?
Well, we have to solve for two problems when you're talking about a standard that moves between four things. We have to determine how we communicate them. Right?
Because that challenge of record auditing and what the record integrity of let the database to handle it.
Oh, no, so that's like, you can invent your own database to solve
Yeah.
this. When you give me the data, it has to include it. There's the distinction in the problem, right?
There's another challenge to make a decision what is really in new version or is not. And my product might say everything in this release is newer version, but in fact it's not true because some parts of the geometry or the product, they don't change, but I still give you a new version. And then your downstream fully depend on that version information, may not be truly reflected. That scenario, the date function is more trustful.
Mechanical engineering world come up with rules on what is like change looks like.
but that's the thing that, for us in food experience, we do have these whole life cycle mechanisms and the versioning in place, but,
And not from a tooling, but from what
changes,
are there different names for like a parameter change versus geometry change versus a rounding error?
It could be anything. Out in the hand of humans, anything can happen.
There, I don't know how it's managed for other kind of version standards or like formats, but the case is what you were saying right now, that for us, every time you run an IFC file, it's considered as a completely new. It's a new version for everything in the file. There's no way to really have that kind of comparison, so not add any of these shapes of whatever you want to consider changed. So, but then what I'm hearing is that it's part of the IFC 5 package of things that will be discussed.
No, but I don't think, there's a clear path. We have an implementation of something that works on IFC 4 and even 3. I don't think we should at least publicize how to do it and talk through how it is. Yeah, and there are, he has a tool that will do comparison. Everybody there are several of these. I think it would come down to, like,
It's more like a best practice and how to do it based on the current format, but there's no plan to.
yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like, everybody just writes one modified data in the file today, but you can write less modified data to every entity. You can use groups. I mean, these sound like solvable short term. Like, this is how you could use the things we have. If you're gonna do it this way. I don't know what we call that, and it's
It's an implementation agreement.
okay.
Yeah.
There we go.
No, I mean, right, like, this is not a new question, right?
Been battling this for 10 years or more than 10 years.
We've been battling this for as long as there's been an owner history, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Before I joined, we were probably battling this. And
But Revit at least now added a version good element, so at least in the proprietary model, there's at least better tracking of what's changed, where you didn't have that 10 years ago, you had it 3 years ago, so. There's at least progress in this direction.
Right, but and the real question, I think the question is being asked is, do we propose a standardized way to forget the proposal, say, thinking of the problem statement, I want to more quickly delta.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. We propose a standardized way, or do we continue to allow John to come up with a solution and Greg to come up with a solution and
What other use case? Like, you want to display what is new, or you want to you version of pick what is new there, or
Actually, I think all of them are applicable. Mine, of course, interpretation of the situation is it's up to the vendor to choose what use cases they implement in the software, and it's up to the IFC, buildingSMART to say, this is how you would do them.
yeah, but I think we need to start from use cases so that we know what we want.
yeah, I think the two major use cases are, say, like literally identifying. And it was
There's different phases.
right, so with John's approach, an export, it takes like a time, or very little time, it's a very little change. So if you have a 3 gigabyte file that takes 2 hours to export, and you change one wall, exporting it takes 2 hours, or maybe 2 minutes.
Yeah.
So performance is a huge reason.
This is I'm sorry, but this is 100% the reason I'm looking at this, saving time on generation.
Okay. But that, like, is need to have in the authoring tool then, the ability to get the information, have a inside on the report, and basically, whatever is the owner history, basically doesn't matter in that case. That's how only happens.
But it probably needs to happen both at import and export, because you could do the export standpoint, indeed, like India, save the time and the performance on the export. But if you are on the other side of the picture, you are the common data environment that is receiving the data, maybe you don't have control on how the information is being exported from the CAD source. So then you also want to be able to compare what has changed between 2 files at the time when you are ingesting the files in the common data environment. Because maybe the source CAD doesn't even have the capability to do delta export. So there you do want to be able to compare what's changed and do the same approach, the delta import of only importing the elements that have changed.
Okay, there's two different, right, so on import there's 2 different use cases. The one you just mentioned was, I have a full new file, and I want to be able to figure out the delta, so I minimally change my model. Then, of course, there's the other one, which is I get a delta file, right, so that I have the minimal data to minimally change my model. And in fact, the delta file also goes for the use case of, I get someone else's data, I merge it with my data, or I do something to it, but I don't want to give them back their data, right? I only want to give them back applications, which that definitely is an IC5.
Yeah.
But I think we've always had, right, you're right, we need to identify the use case in which ones we want to solve. think probably owner history by itself in its current incarnation probably not sufficient. Otherwise, we would have.
Wouldn't it solve the import issue that you get the full file and you want to find out what are you had, for example, two owner histories. One is the original that you already have, and then the other has the new stuff, and then you would only import it.
When, like, what you're describing is the demo I'm working on with the Quantic guys, that's the only thing they rely on, and it works just fine. That every object has an owner history. I mean, it's not perfect enough to make the comparison.
Every object has an owner history, and there was a definite way to determine that later date truly does mean it's a newer version. And we figured out the problem of cascading, right? Change the type, does that mean every instance? Figured out all of that, then yes, very quickly reject. It is. So they ignore. Again, there'd be a question of what happens if I have a date that's before and a date that's after the file. That's inconsistent. I don't know. But certainly a quick reject that was probably wrong.
On the biggest data sets, I would live with two verbose change information, even if it's not a real change.
Yeah.
I would absolutely live with that first.
Right.
And versus precision. Like type changes, yeah, automatically. Instance changes, fine. Like that stuff, I think you could start with like messy one that you get more changes than you actually have, but it would be better than what we have today.
Real-time update is definitely correct direction that people should put efforts on, not only in the BIM and AC domain, in mechanical domain, design domain. They're also trying to find out how only update the cell, not update the full. Especially when the industry is changed together. So the other products build on the information from the previous product. And then when you have a new version, I do not want to redo everything. I only want to change the parts, either manually or automatically, for the parts you change. So everyone wants to know what is changed, what is new. And then any format, in fact, are facing the same challenge, include IFC and the other formats as well. And so the good thing is for us how to make the decision for what to change. By the south or by the way you're getting that one. So apparently there are two ways is from the south. I'll tell you what is new. And the other way is when you receive the file, you do the diff, and then in your standard, your judgment, you decide
how much you want to change it on.
Yeah, and when the south will tell you this is changed, it may not really mean to change in your standard. And so there are systems and calculate the checkup. And in your standard, I care about those numbers. If those things are changed, I consider I will do that. So when they set the first version, they calculate the check. And they remember the check. Next version come again, they calculate the checksum, they compare the checksum. And then they say, okay, this part I need to change, and the other part I don't. So in that situation, it's really not too much about how you standard define what is new. It's really up to.
So just an action, working on the strategy, John's working on the strategy, would proper way forward be to just propose something in the future about the basics of how to use it, what we have today? I mean, I'm not saying you shouldn't work on it too, but that the agreed way we should tackle this is a starting point.
Who else is interested in it right now?
You have a way to export Delta IFC files from.
Yeah, if anyone wants details, I do have like a YouTube clipboard online meeting or something, Greg and I, we could get an online meeting of who's interested in this topic and talk about these.
Yeah, because we some years ago, we proposed together with graphics of how to deal with the object.
It was the first demo of the CDE project.
So basically, I mean, we are using that thing, the online link between ArchiCAD and SolidWorks. Sending from ArchiCAD only, like first time you send the file and then you send deltas and it works. Basically, like a small change the header. Now in ArchiCAD sends if there are components that are deleted, and that information is sent kind of outside of the IFC file. But we couldn't embed that in the IFC file as well.
Yeah.
I think was the only comment I had.
Yeah.
Before it went private, I was like, we don't have an external file, just put that in the header and you're done.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, there is an only history standard deleted. The trouble is in other software, see that and don't.
Right, but the issue with deleted is you still have to have a placeholder.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
But you could also just say, you know what, forget that. The header is going to have deleted GUIDs,
Yeah.
right? And that's that.
Yeah.
So, and that's what I'm saying, like, we can come up with something which is a combination implementers agreement, combination use of IFC owner history, combination, you know, what ArchiCAD and Solibri are still doing, or already doing. Have a proposal, because I do think that's the way forward is. If there are a number of it looks like there are a number of interested people, and then standards, because I think we'd be interested too.
Yeah, I mean, that we could get that working with IFC4, and then things would be different.
Yeah. I mean, everybody has figured out the problems to solve deletions. Camps in there, figured out pieces of how to do this. So it would be relatively straightforward. Come to conclusion on how to do it. Is a different. I'll take it on to coordinate it, but like I got the list that it's on Ozzy, on Hill.
Do you want to be involved?
I'm involved on the structure side, because here, better comments, this is a lot simpler for building.
Oh, it's yeah.
Can I just email you on how you'll distribute internally?
Yes.
Okay.
Greg, a quick one. So are you considering also the use case of concurrent editing, meaning A is the source, B and C work in parallel?
Well, there's you have to do the three-part merge? No, not right now at least. This isn't.
Okay.
Like a merge and a reverse.
But there's an Italian guy that's done a Git tool that's trying to solve three.
The answer is you solve it process-wise. You don't allow concurrent things, right?
Well,
that would be the easiest one.
That's what I was talking about the last modified data. It can be tricky if you have concurrent, or you have multiple users.
Yeah.
Right? Because you could get into some sort of weird case where the data is no longer really. Need to finish the process to make sure.
Yeah.
It depends on, well, from a rev point of view. Yeah. Right? You have central file and you have local files. Yeah. Right? If everything is based on the central, there's no issue. But if a local user, two local users.
Luckily, your technology forces you to fix the central and get new IDs so that you can't be out of sync.
Well, I'm saying the date.
But in the case that you still have like the two people that are working concurrently for Tools and Revit, and then you use them for their input into Revit.
Trouble with like Git version control thing applied to IFC is merge conflicts, because that's going to take a lot of work and effort to allow users to resolve merge conflicts.
Right. You did it graphically. It could be.
I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying there's some.
That's also like why there's two levels of it, right? One is how you change the IFC file so that you are able to capture that. So basically, like you were saying, then it's up to the vendor to, okay, I have the information that I need, then in my own software, I make whatever decision I want with that information to hold decision. It's definitely a good idea to take that into account, in terms of defining use cases for the definition, but later on it can be upfront one to how you manage the information that you get from the IFC file.
The key thing, though, is okay to err on the side of this didn't change. If you err on this, if you make any mistake whatsoever on this change and we didn't tell you, it won't be trusted. People will do their own calculations anyway,
Yeah, of course.
and it'll be even worse.
No, for sure,
Right, so.
for sure.
Yeah, this, so I can go on a very long time.
Yeah. I get it.
These are two other topics.
So our topics hopefully more brief, because I think that they are.
No, take your time a little bit.
There are two Q&A questions, I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Where are they?
This is history version is captured by the CDE, like mentioned early yesterday.
That's at the file level,
Yeah.
not at the individual object level.
Yeah.
Unless you had a model.
But also talking about the different solutions. So whatever you're doing in your authoring tool, like it's exported and then it's agnostic, like what coming
Yeah.
back from the other. So yeah.
It's not easy to know what's changed in mesh. Yep, that makes sense. You gotta highlight it in some way. You gotta get highlight lines, you gotta do.
You have to.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, first you have to calculate what's changed,
Yeah,
which
so
can be
the
a nightmare.
question is how to calculate, what to calculate, to
Yeah.
make the decisions that they'll change.
On a mesh, on a surface mesh that's 50 square miles and one triangle or three triangles changed. The whole thing is marked as changed, or do you highlight the three triangles?
I think highlighting would be out of scope,
Yeah.
or anything like that. Yeah.
The next topic is the topic of, we call it instance versus reference, and it's how you manage the exact copies of the single entity, and how you're able to refer to all those as the same object. The example that is mentioned in this slide, well, for procurement, you want to see all the objects that are exactly the same copy to like of that object leveling. Like for Windows, for instance, and as of today, like in the IFC standard, there are multiple ways. Actually, there are 35 different ways to describe that two objects are identical to different aspects that are mentioned there that are beyond my scope. But yes, basically, there are apparently 7 ways of showing geometry and 5 of showing attributes. And well, I don't know if there's any thoughts on the matter, if anyone has come across the same problematic, or if anyone has come up with a solution already based on the existing definition of IFC.
It's like a window, you have your relating type, and then you have your representation map that you can relate to the type, and then fundamentally the way you say that you've got 1,000 windows that are, yeah.
Well, this came up and I asked the question what map was for. What's the difference then?
Explicitly, you can infer a relationship between a type and a representation map, which is like a block of cells. That's clearly stating that that type has that like shape definition. It's kind of one way of validating without having to go and compare lots of geometry to say that. Again, I don't know how well it's been used, but
We saw that a lot in the railway use cases. Obstacle file optimization, where the sleeper element was defined, the shape was defined once and linked to the sleeper type, and then you have thousands of sleeper items, like objects, placed along your element.
Is that what you mean? Because is that reference, how many windows of reference X to X
Yeah, I think-
order? Is that the type?
I think it's the same as with the sleeper case. Yeah, you have like the same geometry and instance, thousands of times or whatever, many times. It's just a matter of like how you're able to identify that it's the same element and information available.
So where I see this group as the implementers or vendors in this group, we should not be creating 35 different groups. yes, the IFC schema is flexible enough, we should be, at worst, having 2 or 3 ways of representing the same data. Ideally, we should come as a consensus, and where we find that window, 35 ways of handling it. That means that downstream workflows are broken. We need as a group to decide that, yes, you can in theory do it these ways, but the best practice is you define it. I think the way forward would be, because there are so many comments, this could occur thousands of places, thousands of use cases. Not expanding the group necessary, but getting someone to propose, this is how I want to do a reference to the window, and we confirm that you will support that and have a test case to prove it, and then you start validating against it. Yes, it might be a pain in the neck for us developers, vendors. There might be physical reasons why certain software can't do that, so we could come back and say, no, we can't do it, or it can't be done at the moment. But IFC schema is very flexible, and there's too many ways you can.
I think that's actually the point that Ollie was trying to make, that precisely you have like so many ways that, like you say, it does feedback and the process is broken. So if the result is an implementer's agreement, I think it's fine. Like as long as everyone has the same understanding of what's the better way to compare the same reference.
This is also something that could be defined in IFC 5, right? There are like 7 ways of doing this.
I think we all agree that this is a fundamental flaw in IFC, but it's also so fundamental that it's not easy to fix. And the aim to fix this is IFC 5. So that's definitely the part. But I think this is also really a good example to kind of link back to the previous presentation of the validation service, because it seems that we do have best practice on this from John and Ivandro. So let's try to put that in the validation service as well, like a formalized implementers agreement, like we discussed earlier, and have that in front of the users as well. Like, this is how you should be doing that. This is how you should be modeling it. Not necessarily wrong. The file is not invalid, but this is the best practice how you should have done this. Maybe it's a really good case to implement in the validation service.
My issue, well, so first off, I completely agree, right, with all of it. I've often used the example of like just the number of ways in IFC you can by line segment, or the axis, right? Very axis of the law can be represented in probably similar numbers. So out of those 35 ways, are there any of those that are actually wrong? Or are any of those that you can't come up with, oh, well, I want to use this in this, like, how do you prevent? Some of the implementers agreement is, I can imagine, for example, the thing I would think for sharing a window, right, is exactly, I have a window type. The window type has a geometry. The window has a mapped item to that window type, and that's the way that you should do it. Sometimes you might have a bespoke window, right? So even though the window has a window type, it's not using, it has something funny. So then that's, which of those 35 ways is something where we can say, this is literally redundant and you would never need this. Those are the ones that we can have an implementers agreement and say, this hierarchy should not be in your file. Use this hierarchy instead. And I don't know. That can't be that small.
I have a bigger version as well. Right?
Yeah, then you know.
We don't want to go through all 35 ways, I think. Not today. Okay, nice.
But right, not today. But that's something that is something that could potentially be done, is to say A and B are functionally equivalent. Let's always use A.
Yeah.
And then again, for IFC5, only be 2 ways of doing it. Here's the shared way, and here's the not shared way.
Just the short answer is, for IFC5, it will be contemplated somehow. For IFC4, there will be some sort of implementers agreement on what is the best way to manage it, based on the different options that we have.
But again, it's something which probably needs a meeting. go through, you present, here are the options, and, you know, a number of people, and then we would have to have a proposal, right? Again, you don't want it to be 6 people in the room in Boston decided,
The other issue we will have is you're going to have owner-operators are expecting IFC in one of these 35 ways because they have a tool, their original tool 5 years, 10 years ago, generated it that way, and they have validation tools. There might be workflows with particular customers where you have to use one of these ways. They won't want to change that.
Pandora's box is already open.
Yeah.
Right? There are already hundreds of thousands of IFC files that are going to have each of those. All we can do is stabilize the future. Still going to be stuck with the 35 ways for every 3.3 and 4.3. You might be allowed to see that.
Okay, so then moving on to the,
question, well, it's more a comment than a question in the chat, from Ron again. There's likely different levels of equality as well, identical types of windows, plus identical shape, plus identical color, finish. Each could be included or excluded from what is identical.
That's sort of a dumb question. If they're equivalent, can't you convert them?
Yes.
Well, so if these are actually equivalent, can't you convert?
You mean convert or compute?
Convert.
You mean like I had a simple BIM that said, please take my IFC file and make it into the preferred format. Yeah, you should be able to do that.
I mean, I'm not saying we need to have a full tool, but like people make these tools. So we should assume that's a path forward as well.
Right.
It doesn't have to be a panacea, it's just something we should not have.
Right, there's all sorts of these possibilities which would like convert everything to 4x3. Right? Yeah, have your file be in the best format.
Yeah.
And then even tools that could be promoted by buildingSMART.
Yeah. Well, like, Posse, I mean, you make an optimizer, you probably do some of this. Right? I mean,
Just so, you know, that I wish it wouldn't be around anymore.
I said to Party after the validation session, delivery model optimizer, depending on how you determine the authoring applications, delivery model optimizer might get a bad name about a lot of IFC files.
Actually, maybe that should get certified and then just send the software, just run it through the optimizer, then it'll be certified.
Develop, calculate how many things, instances.
The idea is to try and avoid that if we can. So.
But we don't ever try to get into the software business.
No.
Okay, so then moving on to the last topic, and it's actually something that has been touched upon already. I know that it will be addressed for IFC 5. I'll discuss that a bit quickly. It's basically how IFC files are structured, and the fact that they are like monolithic. Well, everyone knows the struggle, like big files are more and more difficult to manage. So the interesting thing is that STEP has already resolved this issue. And they're working with a multi-file structure. So what they're doing is, here I'm like, but yeah, they have like this step file for describing the product structure, and then one step file for each geometry, which allows to have like this modularity that also in exchange facilitates the delta import process and the ability to have these, well, yeah, you know, to just import what has changed. And yeah, for nested assemblies with step file for product. Yeah, so I guess that the answer is also like IFC 5. And,
so this came up in Zurich from ODA. You guys brought it up. I can't remember who spoke in Zurich.
Yeah, we get demand for this. We're going to implement a solution of our own, but we're also wanting to contribute to the discussion in IFC 5 about it.
Yeah, but I think we know there's actually, it's because we're on an old version of STEP, right? We haven't implemented the, whatever it is to do this. Know things, but not the technical details. Can you describe what we'd have to do to, or something?
Update looking for.
So, Neil, can you, if you're gonna do something, what are you gonna do?
I don't have technical details, but we're gonna have our own file format that can contain references to other IFC files. And so the top level container file will be some custom format that we develop. So it's not gonna be something that's part of the standard. But it's a solution so that people can actually get this feature in their products and get it working, and then we'll get some experience with the problems involved with the technology. I'm sure our guys are looking at it because we just finished, we're getting our first production release of our STEP SDK out, so we already support that. So I would assume it'll be modeled on that, but I don't have the details.
I mean, of course, if that's the way that it's then we need to.
Sure.
ISO standards on this. Not sure if you remember this COINS initiative, kind of evolved into an ISO standards. I don't know the name, and also has something with linked containers or something like that in it. Be very, very popular for PhD students in academia. And the principles are all the same. This ISO standard works with linked data. You have the STEP standards that's kind of trying to mimic the linked data principles to do the same thing. There's a couple of initiatives out there that try to.
You should hear those things before that after that thing. I mean, what is your use case, right? Because I created a hierarchy of IFC files, and you just load them all in anyway. That presumably doesn't solve your problem, right? So how do you determine what subset of the data that you want? Or do you want a subset of the data? What are you looking for?
I think the processing of files
But is the processing of 50 megabyte files okay?
if I understand, yeah.
I don't, that's right.
So I've got two fronts, and I'm looking at this again from the infrastructure. The small assembly block for a surface might be massive. So, longer term, we might have to split that down into smaller objects. You're talking 500 meg files. I've got 3 gig, 4 gig IFC files from relatively simple infrastructure projects. This whole thing and these structures you're showing here, I know simplify, but the overview of those objects and showing the objects across different disciplines of the same model. I think this is, I don't think we should be shoehorning. Personally, I wouldn't try and shoehorn it into IFC4 and get IFC4 to support this. I think breaking down the model and the structure of the model is the goal of IFC5 anyway. I think this should be delayed until IFC5. Consider it as a mandatory key requirement for IFC5, not even an optional requirement that things are broken down into small containers.
But this is hard because it shows one file containing links to the others versus an independent link structure that just links files together. I imagine that's what you're doing, right? You have this separate file that just holds all the relationships, and that's all.
Exactly.
Right. Well, I could imagine conceptually, I have my file that has all my types. I have all my files that have all my instances. All the types just point to this.
But I think
just point to the type, or
I think you're doing I'm just guessing, you're doing something even simpler, which is you describe like a collection of files and nested them, or choose.
some type of container. I don't know the details yet, but we'll have something by the end of the year.
In theory, I can have my Revit or my infrastructure model. I could have every single thing geolocated in it, and every single window is in an individual IFC file. And I just use a digital twin or a viewer that can just read every file in the folder. Got that solution. Broken everything down into the smallest possible components. So,
Copy it all, and now instead of having references to each individual window, we now have.
yeah, so we need, I think this is an IFC problem.
Oh, absolutely.
If you get it right, and I did it now, I suspect we will alienate industry.
Going back 15 years again, to the first time we discussed this,
Yes.
one of the solutions at the time was, I view this is an actual file format, and at the moment it is literally a zip IFC. There's no reason why an IFC zip file couldn't itself contain a hierarchy, or even just multiple files, where you say, okay, any GUID inside of an IFC zip, okay, as long as it points to something, yeah, multiply IFC files, or you could reference something that is packaged together, right? Because that's the other issue with this, right?
Yes, but you cannot, in a legal IFC file, you cannot build a relationship by GUI using these line numbers.
Yeah.
Legally correct, right? That's the problem we have right now.
Yeah.
And again, I'm just thinking back, like, what are the discussions we've had over the last few decades? Again, not surprising this is not the first time this has come up.
We need to get away from the line numbers to get this to work.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a fundamental change to IFC. And unfortunately, I don't think that's a 4.x change. It's going to have to be a 5 or 6 change.
But just to level set, so the suggestion was made is maybe change, partial exchange solves most of this, so we focus on that. And I think there's a distinction. One is, I have 2 files and they're friends. I just want to load them both at the same time or only one. And then that's the dumb version of this problem. The smarter version, which is long term, is, oh, this object has a relationship to those objects and I want to pull them through at load or don't want to pull them through. That's certainly IFC 5. I mean, it'll be interesting to see what Neil does, because it sounds you're doing the simple one, not the hard one. And if the simple one works, we should revisit it.
Right, but that's not an IFC solution, right?
Right.
No.
So,
Right.
fine, but it's not standard.
Unless we make it standard.
Yeah, just
I mean,
make
you make it standard, but it's going to be, like you said, it's not going to be legal per se.
And also,
And BCF wasn't a standard until they made BCF.
Sure.
and I'm assuming, let's take the rail example, I've got 2 railway tracks, one railway track is in one file, one railway track is in the other, and I have the sleepers. They've got the same GUID in both files, because they're defined in both files, they need to be in both files. So we repeat defining of the sleeper. And when we merge them into one model, do we throw away one of the sleepers? I don't know how ODA is going to implement it, or do we have both sleepers and we have 2 GUID objects in the merged model? And that's why I think the problem needs to be deferred.
Just do display, this is simple.
Just display is easy.
But to your point, I think, right, that IFC5 problem, the IFC4 potential solution is let's exchange smaller amounts of data, right? But to your previous, and we work on that, and this problem becomes less.
We're just going to keep pushing the problem down the road far enough that computers get big enough to worry about it.
Well, I think along the things around funny. I mean, the things around IFC5, where I'm going to assume IFC5, we're not going to be referring to things by step ID number, right? So, right, that seems like a fundamental.
Look at me.
What?
I'm not, you're looking at me or?
You yourself, you're going to know. I mean, that seems to me like a fundamental sort of change that would be the good feature for. And once you have a GUID can be anywhere.
How about AVU? allow the external reference, not only reference to IFC file, reference to the other format. And for a window designed by staff, and then just reference the file, this file is in the stat box. The mechanical use of that. So you really open up a big door for all kinds of situations.
Yeah, and the documentation is a Word doc, right?
Yeah, that might be Pandora's box.
I think.
All you guys already make these little, like, every PWG-based tool in the world has collections of documents that you can document a structure externally that's or an XML file, right? That's the simple version. I mean, that's not a hard thing.
Yeah, and every software in this room can handle a set file, an IFC file, or, combination. Maybe you can't read all of it. I don't think that's Pandora's box. I think it's okay to be able to say, maybe we don't want the geometry in step, but having the documentation as an URL or having a PDF.
Yeah, as long as the one who reads calls the API to get it. They can filter.
Right. You want to make sure that, the IFC part should be whatever that MDD requires, right? The IFC file shouldn't be a pointer to the reference document. Right, that's ridiculous.
That's a lot today. AP242 XML.
Sure, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot that.
Papers, in front of paper, 2002, they started to address that, I think. And in the case of two regular models coming together, the relief definition, geometric definition, it's actually a third file that both railway files are using. It's not designed completely independently. So yeah, both that examples that where they tackle the mechanical engineers are dealing with these kind of issues for a long time now. So I think reduce some of their work.
Does everyone look at me?
You're standing up.
You're standing up.
Just standing up.
My bad. I wanted to be first on that one.
Are you happy?
Yeah, I think that it's smart.
Cool. Yeah, so, and you got all the email addresses so you can spam everyone and follow up actions and all kinds of stuff. So.
Wonderful.
All right, thank you. So next one is Bernhard. Yeah, I see you unmuting.
Yes, hello.
Are you trying to talk?
Yes, hello from Germany. You can hear me?
Yeah, we can hear
Okay,
you. If
thank
you can
you.
speak up a little bit more, that would be awesome.
Okay. I have only one slide. Try to share. One moment, please. It was the wrong screen. Okay. You see only the upper left part. No? I hope you.
See the presenters modes.
One moment, please.
While you're trying to share, I'll try to do an introduction. So Bernhard is a well-known member of the tech community and also a well-known supporter of the open house. I think he's suggested a couple of topics previously as well. Usually quite appealing, creative, and interesting, and also usually quite short. So looking forward to these ones. I think you have two, right, Bernhard?
Only one, only this slide I want to speak about. And yes, I will start. My topic speaks about type libraries. And the problem I describe here only occurs when you are changing building parts in a model. If you want to change one building part to another from different producers. And I have made here an example with a power outlet. When you look at the left side, you see the typical standard. It's a drawing and the measurement with distance. Most of the standards are the same, not the same principle. And most of them are written on paper or PDF files. And when you use the standards for product types, then, for example, manufacturer A make a digital twin of his product and says, okay, my origin is here. And the second one, manufacturer B, says, no, my origin is here. And when you start to insert an instance of a product type, the problem is that from manufacturer A, the power outlet is correct placed in the wall, but when it comes from manufacturer B, it was placed outside the wall. Or also this could be possible if your standard placement in the wall is inside the wall. The same problem is with alignment of the coordinate axis. If manufacturer A has this coordinate system, manufacturer B this one, and manufacturer C, then while inserting in the wall, you have different placements. So what you need is, if you want to exchange products, you need a standard where you describe the insert point and the direction of the X, Y, Z axis. And the perfect way would be, it doesn't come from paper, it comes from an IFC model. And this problem occurs also if you make plans in public projects. You need to plan product neutral. And then later, when you start building, you place product specific types. So the question is how to solve this problem. And I see two possible solutions. The first solution is to exchange or make an update of every standard from this to this, perfectly with an IFC model. And the second solution could be to start a new external standard that link to the existing standards, and always describe for every standard here for power outlet. I have the problem with pipes, and say, okay, for this standard, we say the insert point is on this place and the axis direction are here. So you have only one new single standard for this requirement. My question to you is, have you known about this problem?
We have one thing about the doors, for example, which is
yes.
That the whole geometry must have only positive coordinates.
Mm-hmm.
Which actually limits the origin.
Mm-hmm. And how you solve this problem?
And of course, if we use the bounding box, then we can set up the origin and also positioning, so that there will be no such variance of local coordinate systems.
And how do you know where's the front and where's the back of the bounding box?
You may check the documentation for the doors.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
There's another difference to the door, right? The door has an opening. that's associated to.
Yeah.
This power outlet, as it's described here, wouldn't cut anything. There's nothing here that says this is void. So this power outlet would still have to be relative to a void, which would then be relative to, I assume that's a wall. And that's how it would be placed in or out.
I have took a look at the library of Great Britain, National BIM Library, and I've looked what they have described there. They had said just use usual insert point, but no standardization. And I think with this example of power outlet, it really could be different. Do you know about someone who wants to solve this problem?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe
We have,
buildingSMART.
we have similar problems with, toilet fixtures, sinks, really anything that can be placed that has an arbitrary geometry that could have an arbitrary origin point, right? Any furniture of any type, cabinetry,
Yes, furniture, that's a good example.
So anything that can be posted, right?
Anything that can be posted.
The concept of an insertion point.
Yeah.
That is the object that will be flush with the host, right? So yes, digital twin manufacturer A and B, that picture on the left is exactly what makes sense to me, right? The origin is going to be on the face of the object that's hosting it by default. And by the way, there is going to be a clash there because that digital twin manufacturer A now has a power outlet in the same place that there's a physical wall because there's no opening, but let's take that as a separate issue. I don't know how it would work otherwise.
I found out this problem by defining pipe types, and I've made a mistake. That was the reason I found this problem. And then I have looked for another example. All people know power outlets, pipes are not the usual. And it's like doors and windows, the same problem.
I think there's an activity proposal currently in buildingSMART's product room. It's been recently renamed to IFC for products, and they want to do kind of work on standardization of manufacturing libraries as well. And indeed, the name of Bjorn Stangeland already fell here as well. He's been interested in this topic for about 15 years at least.
Yeah.
Would that be helpful to you to get in touch with those people?
Yes, this would be nice.
Okay, yeah, we can do some introductions.
I think the biggest problem is it's a lot of work. You must look at every drawing, at every standard, and make a decision.
So I've wondered for a while if we need to bring mating concepts. Like we have constraints, and constraints are complex, but if we had some very simple mating concepts, which are mechanical things that two things know how they come together, this would be much easier to describe. It doesn't solve it in the short term, but...
for the power outlet specifically, there would probably be a connector, right?
Right.
Some electrical system.
But with the toilet problem, it's the same thing. A pipe has a mate at the bottom of the toilet.
Which is a connector.
Yes.
But does the connector have any sort of constraint capability?
Point at the bottom of your toilet, point in the pipe, right, which is where they meet.
Are you describing IFC or just the physical concepts? Does anybody use those concepts in IFC?
Yes.
It has nothing to do with IFC. You know? It's just a decision on a picture. No? The IFC can describe everything.
I mean, generally, you locate the port at the location that physically it's at. So in the toilet, you locate the port at wherever the
Well, no,
outflow
this is the distinction. Mates belong to the objects, not is an object. So you mate things by plugging them together, not by putting a thing between them.
Bernhard,
Yes.
did you also have another topic still on your?
If you want, yes, okay.
Yeah.
One moment, please. Oh, yes. Okay, the second topic. The second topic, I want to talk about explanation of IFC. I'm in several working groups for OpenBIM, mostly in water management. And for most of the people, IFC is absolutely new. They know that it exists, but no one knows how it works. And I think there are a lot of people that don't know how an IFC file is structured and so on. And so I start make an explanation by hand in PowerPoint. You see here just a single line, and everything that's new, I made a yellow underground. Here on the right side, you see a UML diagram, and on the right top, you see a result of the IFC viewer. Here, the second one is now addition of units and 3D representation, and everything that is new is highlighted in yellow, also in the UML diagram, and then here the picture's result picture. Here, the third one, addition of geodetic coordinates and properties, also underlaid in yellow, also in the UML diagram. When you do it one time, it's no problem. But if you have bigger examples or often much more examples, then the problem is it's too much work. So I decided to make it automatically by code. Here it's with the smallest possible example, just one line on the right side. In UML entity, and this is HTML on the left side, and on the right side the UML diagram is made with scalable vector graphics embedded in HTML. And here the second one is the first line is not highlighted. The project line, everything that's new, is now highlighted in yellow highlighted, and also in addition of the UML diagram is added here. And so on. And how it works, it's made this way. It's made by C# code. I've created additional classes to the IFC entities with the name toUML and the coordinate where to place on the screen. And here are conditional defines. If you're on step in the step 2, creating a line, then create these entities. And the yellow highlighting is made here inside a command. And here the IFC entities. And on this place, it's new IFC entity rel aggregates, and from this project aggregates also is made an UML entity. That's how it works. And how to build a bigger example is made this way. It's a call of the building C# build compiler. It's a call of a batch file. The first example is only single project line. The second project end line. The third project line and units. The fourth project line, units and 3D dependents, and so on. And a single instance is made this way, that you call the C# builder and call the constants here that are defined, the conditionally defined here on the topic. Create this program with this conditional defines, gives them an assembly name so that you can give the export file the name here. That's always the last entry. And after creating the executive file, you can call it, and the result is what you have seen here before. You have one file with this example, next file with this example, and so on. I want to show it. I want to show two things. First, I want to give the hint. There's a lot of people that have really no idea how IFC files works, and I think it's good to start with very, very small examples. Yeah, here is the way how to make these examples. I come from piping systems, so I made piping examples. I think other people will make other examples. That's is a possible way to make it. Any questions?
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, any questions from the room? I have a question, actually, Bernhard. So on the first slide, you showed some really nice examples.
Show again.
We have this user.buildingSMART.org website now, which is a knowledge base for people who want to share examples or best practices. Yeah, basically knowledge articles. Would you be able to turn this slide and these examples into such an article and publish it there?
Yeah, for sure.
For the
Yes.
better good of the world.
Mm-hmm.
I'll share the link, and that's follow up offline to make sure that you have publishing rights on that as well.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Good idea. Mm-hmm.
All right. On the room. Great question. Yeah, this is from previous sessions.
Yeah, I guess my question is when you look at this from a documentation point of view, like what Bern's showing, is this getting too verbose where you would include it in standardized documentation for ISO, or would this, like, having the supplementary knowledge-based type of material be better for you, Leon, and Evandra?
I had a similar discussion with Thomas about some further information on alignment that recently came up and are really good for implementation, and we traced a clear line between what is normative and what is informative.
Yeah.
So I think that in new documentation, one of the beauty of that is that we can extend with a couple of annexes and say these are informative things, such as examples, such as extensions, definitions that can help implementation, and it's only definitely a way forward.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Bernhard.
Okay,
thank you for staying up so late as well.
No problem. Mm-hmm.
Much appreciated.
Mm-hmm. Bye.
Next up is Neil.
Yeah, I can just, if you're already hooked in, I've got it on a stick, I just got a presentation. That's probably easier than two. All right, so, yeah, I just got an update from our tech guys about the work we've been doing on our IFC tool set. So the work on 4.3, the official, well, it's not the ISO standard, but the 4.3.00 release, we've got support for that. We're still supporting RC4. And we've got support now for all of the 4.3 transition curve types, in complex cases for cant alignments and sweeps. IFC fixed reference swept area solid, and IFC directrix derived swept area solid. So we've made curve types. Validation engine. So we've got a validation engine that we've been working on now for about a year, I think. Our free viewer, OpenIFC viewer. The latest version, better stability, it's more robust, improve the user interface at the API level. You can do custom validation and healers. Have an extended set of format-dependent validations and healers available. And we also generate a nice HTML validation report now. So I think some of this isn't available in the latest version that's downloadable, but we're doing this stuff for our conference. It'll be out, I think, in the release.
When you say healers, then are you editing and then rewriting a new IFC file?
We're changing it. Yeah, you could save out a new file, but so you have the option of fixing, if the problem's fixable, got the option of fixing it. We have a new PSP QTO engine. So it's a property set definition quantity takeoff engine. So you can take machine-readable information about property sets and quantity takeoffs and attach that to objects. So the PSP and QTO metadata is available from on the BSI website as part of the IFC documentation. You can do custom PSP and QTO data, and we've also added some ability in our validation engine to verify that standard or custom property sets are present and that they're populated correctly. That's another new feature. Modeling enhancements. We support a number of different formats across our product line. So the goal is to be able to take 3D solids and any of the other products that we have that we support and convert those over. So you export that as IFC. So we can take, we've done extensive testing now with DWG. You can take an AC solid and convert that into our BREF framework and then save it out as IFC Advanced BREF and an IFC model. Revit, also we've done a lot of work with Revit, and CGN and STEP also coming online. We haven't tested these very much, but to be able to take those solids, run them through the same conversion process, and save them as IFC. We are working, well, we've actually implemented some advanced editing features. So you can now select an object and delete it and get rid of all the IFC product derived instances along with geometrical representation. For people that want to be able to IFC files, also cloning support. You can take an object now and clone it either into the same model or into a different model. So operations that make it nicer to work with IFC models. And year-end, the creation of merged or federated models. I think our use case is more, we can have like a building is separated out with the electrical and the plumbing and different files, and we're looking at the visualization case. But the discussion that we just had a few minutes ago about some of the problems with that issue in general, I think was very helpful, and I'll take that back to our team. I think we're just looking to solve a simple problem because we're that, and we had I don't know if we even considered some of these other issues. We will look at those. So our free OpenIFC viewer, we've been working on some utilities that we use for debugging. So we have a new curve and segment set of dump plugins. So you can dump a detailed view of curve data And you can look at the curvature point data or actually do the graphical representation of a curve in a separate window. So that's the screenshot here. And then you can write that stuff out to a file. So if you're debugging IFC data, this can be useful. And we have a new tree view plugin that shows the model as a hierarchical tree for model exploration, searching for instances, and selection based on is instance of and is kind of built other viewers. And some of this stuff I think is not in the latest release version, will be out in the next one versions that we've published. Unrelated to IFC, but we have a STEP SDK now. We released a beta version in January, and September we'll have our first production release. So read-write, visualize STEP models, support combined visualization of IFC and STEP in our visualization framework. Now there's STEPX files. It's based on our Express engine that we use for IFC, so you can use the same API for STEP and IFC. The AP203, 214, 238, and the AP242 schemas, custom schemas. And I think in the September release, we'll have AP243, the latest AP242 standard will be supported. And similar to our Open IFC viewer, we'll be publishing an Open Step viewer by the end of the year. Hope at some point it becomes like a reference implementation. They have a reference viewer for STEP at this point, but it's kind of a legacy Windows application. Our viewer is a modern framework, cross-platform, and made by us, a professional team, and volunteers. So we're offering that up as a reference viewer for STEP. And just a quick note, if you're interested in seeing any demos of this stuff or learning about other ODA technologies, we have a virtual conference coming up September 20th, conference.opendesign.com. Sign up. We have an IFC panel discussion that several of you here kindly agreed to help us with, update on our Scan to BIM project that we started earlier this year, and update on all of our other products. So that's it. Does anyone have any questions?
The healing.
Yeah.
What sort of healing are you doing?
I don't have a list, but I can have Igor, if you just get, he can give you I think we don't have documentation, but he can give you a list at this point.
We would definitely be interested in files with large coordinates. Origin.
You had a slide where you, with the clone and delete with the window.
Yeah.
Well, what did you mean by it? Can you give an example of what the functionality is?
Yeah, you can pick an object and just delete it out of the model.
And then it deletes, does it also delete the IFC opening elements?
I don't know about the details of that, but it cleanly deletes an element out of the model, so you can do editing.
Yeah, you mean cleanly delete, it also deletes the property sets and everything that, But how far does it go then? Is it also?
You have to talk to Igor about the details, so I don't know that level of detail about it.
Yeah, you were looking at me as if you had an answer, but.
No, anyone else? Anything? I just want to say thanks for putting on this meeting. It's been a really, really nice couple of days here.
So Dan doesn't have enough footage yet, so we asked him to do thank you and a closing again. I know you're all tired. But I really indeed did want to thank you. The only complaint I heard was from you yourself. Less food, more beer. So let's get next time. But no, it was wonderful, really set the bar for any other additional meetings. So that's also a reminder to vendors that we're still looking for a host for the February meeting, and next one, September, October. So yeah, if you're interested in receiving a bunch of nerds, then really happy to come on. Thank you again. And I think we still have the tour, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be a very, informal tour.
Informal,
Since
that's perfect.
we don't get access to any of the good stuff, but yeah, I can help people around here.
Cool. And thank you all for coming over. Wonderful, wonderful students.
Yeah, thank you.